Hello and welcome. My name is Rashim Mogha and I'm your host for this Empowered Women of the World podcast. This podcast is for you. It is for me and it is for all women who want to take charge of their career and happiness. In this weekly podcast, we'll talk about technology, we'll talk about leadership, and we will talk about mindfulness. We'll talk about how you can discover, visualize, and actualize your success, whatever that means to you. We will also talk about our common opponent, the conscious and unconscious bias, which we deal with on daily basis. And we'll share ways to navigate work politics. At the end of each podcast, I will share with you a tip or a resource that you can use to be successful. It's going to be a fun ride, so hop on and join me on this journey every week. Now, before I get started with today's podcast, I have a big announcement for you guys. I'm so excited to invite you and your friends and your co-workers and everybody in your network to join our first ever eWOW virtual summit on April 1st through 3rd. 3 tracks, 3 days. We're going to have mindful leadership, tech talks, and career conversation tracks. There are going to be over 20 plus global speakers who are excited to share their knowledge on a variety of topics like acing an interview, cloud computing, blockchain, AI, and resilience. And the best of all, it's a free summit, guys. Yes, it's free. The link is in the show notes below, so make sure to sign up before all the seats are filled. And now for today's podcast. In the last podcast, I provided tips on how to find a job after a break. And many of you reached out to me and asked me on tips on how to negotiate your salary. So in today's podcast, I'll talk about negotiating salary. Now, it is important to remember that negotiations can include all aspects of your compensation, including the base pay, bonuses, stock options, benefits, perks, vacation time, and other things like job title and flexibility. So let's get started with the tips. Tip number 1, know what you want from a compensation perspective. Even before you start applying for the jobs, it's important to list down your negotiables and your non-negotiables. Also, it's important to know what is the lowest compensation that you will accept for a job. Knowing these numbers will help you in your research for jobs and also conversations with the hiring team. They will also remove the fluff and you'll help to identify real opportunities as opposed to every job role or job posting that you see. The second tip that I have for you is to do your research. Use platforms like Glassdoor and LinkedIn and Indeed to identify salary ranges for a job role. Now, it's important to know that compensation varies greatly depending on the location and a company, so be very specific in your research. The third tip is do not bring up your compensation in your initial conversations with either the recruiting team or the hiring managers. Now, whether you're meeting your potential hiring manager for a coffee or whether you are having a screening interview with a recruiter, make sure that you do not bring up compensation. If your hiring manager or if your recruiter who is screening you asks you what is your expectation around salary, try to dodge that question. And it's very easy to do that. You can say that you're open based on the position and the overall package. I normally reply with a question saying, it's very early on in the conversations, but I would like to know what is the range that the company or the hiring manager has set for this role. Also, I ask about yearly bonus, RSUs, stock options, and signing bonus. Now, this technique has always worked for me. Once I get the range, I know whether it works for me or not. It also tells me whether it's a true opportunity for me. But in all circumstances, I would strongly advise you not to throw in the number in the first conversation. Now, tip number 4, take your time to accept an offer. Once you receive an offer, resist the temptation to accept or reject it right away. Even if the offer is excellent, you do not want to accept or reject it right away. Sometimes a simple reply that says, I need to think over it, can actually get you an increase in the original offer. So Take your time. There's no rush. Buy in a couple of days. Weigh your pros and cons before you say yes or no to the offer. Now, the fifth tip that I have for you is consider saying no. If you're hesitant about a position or the company culture, and if you really don't know, you're not so jazzed up about the offer, a no can actually bring you a better offer. So if you say no to the offer, it can bring you a better offer. But do not use this tactic if you need the job. Because sometimes when you say no, there's a risk that the employer might accept that you're declining the position and they will move on to the next candidate. So weigh your pros and cons very carefully before you consider this. And the sixth tip that I have for you is to negotiate your benefits. Now, if you cannot negotiate much on the comp package, consider whether there are employee benefits or perks that might be negotiable even if the salary isn't. Now, I haven't personally negotiated on the benefits because mostly in large companies, there's very little flexibility on the benefits, but I have negotiated on flexibility and remote working options. And I was able to actually get that in my jobs at VMware, Amazon Web Services, as well as at Oracle. So I hope you find these tips helpful. And today's free resource for you is a link to our first eWOW Virtual Summit, April 1st to 3rd. Reminding you again, it's virtual, it's global, it's free. We have limited seats, so make sure to register now. The link is in the show notes below. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for loving, liking, sharing, supporting this podcast. Remember, sharing is caring. I love your feedback, emails, and messages, so please keep them coming. Please also keep the topics coming because it gives me an idea on what you guys want to listen to. Our audience is growing exponentially each week, which is awesome. I'm loving it. I look forward to seeing you again in our next podcast. Till then, keep empowering the world.